Welcome to Transcendent Leadership. We bring together top leaders and experts to share their unfiltered truth about the journey to self-actualization and the path to heart-centered leadership. You'll hear raw lessons, learn ancient wisdom, and practical steps to rise to your fullest potential. Now is the time to walk into this new paradigm of leadership. Let's transcend together. Hello, and welcome back to the Transcendent Leadership Show. My name is Carissa Johnson. I'm your host, and this is the first time that we have a repeat guest. Mo, I don't know if you know this, but you are the first repeat guest. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation with my dear friend and incredible epic human, Mr. Moe Rock, who is a producer and investor, CEO of the Los Angeles Tribune, and author of The Moral Compass, 28 Principles of Integrity-Driven Leadership. He has served for 2 years as a business outreach chair and has helped over 1,000 angel investors worldwide. Collectively, they have invested over $900 million over 25 years. Today, in addition to running the historical Los Angeles Tribune brand, he is passionate about community outreach, leadership programs, and to date has executive produced programs that have featured Jack Canfield, Brian Tracy, Bob Proctor, and Bill Gates. Welcome again to the show, Mr. Moe Rock.
Thank you, Carissa. I'm excited to be here. It's a pleasure and privilege to be here. I'm honored to be the first returning guest on this awesome podcast. I know the folks that listen to your podcast, of which I periodically am one of. This podcast is more like an experience, and it's a profound experience, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you. I think you and I, we've probably already had hundreds of podcasts that we've done. We just haven't hit the record button. And so I'm excited for once one of our awesome podcasts will be recorded because you're such a great friend and you're a great colleague, and you've helped us out so much with a lot of our endeavors at the Tribune over the years. And as I've gotten to know you as a friend, I've learned that, talking to Carissa Johnson usually ends up being a podcast anyway. So I'm excited that the folks can be a fly in the wall for today's episode.
Our conversations just make me so giggly sometimes too. And I think the audience loves the realness of what we're going to dive into and share. And I know before we were talking a little bit about the intention for the show, and you're really adamant, and I really respect the adamancy around the practicality, because I think there's a lot of discussion around what leadership is, what it isn't, and sometimes it gets lost in the esoteric world of like, oh, it's this thing that kind of floats around. And you've written a book about 28 principles, which I want to dive into. But before we do that, I do want to give my audience a little bit of a sneak peek behind the scenes of your journey in self-leadership, which I think has helped you learn how to lead other people better, and particularly your work in the entertainment industry and how you've experienced some trials and some tribulations in that way, and how it's empowered you to really show up in the world differently and have a greater mission that's focused on a larger contribution to the world, while not losing the part of you that also really loves music and producing in that way. So tell us a little bit about your journey in the entertainment industry and what that was like for you.
Absolutely. So I think that a lot of times when you see someone who's a CEO of a national brand, there's really, only a few different ways that they kind of got to that position. One of which is the traditional path, which is you get an MBA from Harvard, or you go to a prestigious business school and you work your way through the ranks, and eventually you become VP of an organization, and then the board of directors decides to make you the CEO. And usually that is a climb that is very by the book, if you will. And then there's also those that have taken the unconventional path. Maybe they're autodidactic. Maybe they started their careers earlier than most. These are the Steve Jobs types. These are the types that actually dropped out of school. Bill Gates, in a non-traditional business sense, but from a standpoint of someone that's impacted the world, Leonardo da Vinci, autodidactic, which basically means self-educated throughout the course of their whole life. And so for me, my education in the world of business, specifically in the world of business, came from the music industry. And I believe that if you are in the music industry at a young age, that to me is not just equivalent to a MBA from Harvard, but in many ways surpasses that. And I'm going to give, and I know a lot of my Harvard MBA friends just got very offended saying, who does this guy think he is? But here's the truth. When you experience real world experience, right, it far surpasses experience in the classroom that's theoretical. And so when I was in the music industry as a teenager, I was a music producer, produced for lots of different artists, Grammy nominated artists, platinum artists, specifically mostly international artists in the Middle East. That was the main market that I worked in. And so consequently, dealing with real human beings, real egos, in an industry that has a wide range of different characters in it was such a profound educational experience in the world of business. And so what I've learned, Carissa, is that understanding human nature and being flexible with human beings is my most valuable asset that has helped me in the world of business. The ability to recognize who a person is, and we all have blind spots. And the second you think you're immune to blind spots is the second you're most prone to blind spots. But for me, individually, working in that industry has helped my transition into different industries, specifically the newspaper and media industry, which I'm so happy and excited to be a part of today. And so hopefully that answers your question. I think the lesson there is appreciating how important it is to recognize human nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I get this question a lot around like, what is leadership? What is business? And I think you're touching on a fundamental principle, which is that we are all in the relationship business, and understanding human psychology, including our own psyche and our own blind spots, as well as understanding the wholeness and the personalities and the characteristics that show up in people that translate to the way that they interact in business is really fundamentally important. And we can't lose the sight of that, right? When we're navigating leadership, whether it be our business or ourselves, I think it's important that we really look at the whole person, right? When you think about LinkedIn and the company that the organizational structure for this, compassionate leadership actually is one of the core tenets for the way that they have organized their team. Actually, his CEO came up with that terminology, and he talked about how there was like a lot of layoffs during COVID, and how he actually changed his principle to look at the whole person. Instead of saying, how is our bottom dollar being impacted? He was like, how are our employees being impacted? And that's at the core of a successful business. And how he chose to lead more compassionately and lovingly, looking at the whole person, was what actually kept LinkedIn as well as other organizations alive during a time when people were really needing to cut costs. And it makes sense. What you want to be practical and understanding the financial aspect and repercussions, but it's also understanding that who are the people that you're leading and what are the needs that they have and what are the personalities and what are the journeys that they had, in order for you to show up in a way that actually offers a space for hope and inspiration, not just the fear and the scarcity around, oh, you're going to get cut if we need to make cuts here. So I really appreciate the sentiment around that.
Yeah, and of course it starts with the relationship that we have with ourselves, right? And I think that's the most important foundational relationship for us to recognize is, do we have self-respect, right? I think a lot of times many things in life have to do with the level of self-respect we have. If someone does not have self-respect, I don't have space in my business or in my life for them, right? Because if they're not going to respect themselves, how could they possibly respect me? Right? If you don't love yourself, trust yourself, respect yourself, you cannot be a leader. It's 100% a prerequisite to truly have authentic self-respect before you could possibly ever think about ever leading someone else. The problem that we have is there are actually people on this planet that don't truly have self-respect, that are putting themselves in positions of leadership. And that's where we have a lot of difficulties in business and politics, in the education system, is because people that don't even care about themselves are now supposed to care about others and the well-being of others. And as we can see from the state of the world, that is a recipe for disaster. And so I'm a big believer in advocating self-respect. I'm a big believer that whenever there's an opportunity to speak on a forum like this, to bring to people's attention how important that is. One, so they can analyze for themselves, but two, so they can analyze in their communities and all of the so-called leaders that are out there in the world. Is that someone that truly looks like they respect themselves? And again, that's the challenge, is to have the skill to recognize that, and everyone has to develop that skill individually.
Yeah, and it comes from experience, like you're saying. While why you're so equipped in this leadership and business space to run this legacy brand is because you've had to learn that experientially from a high level of trails and triumphs and discernment, right? You like sharpen and refine that discernment. And as you were talking, it reminded me too of when we're talking about self-respect. In many ways, we teach other people how to treat us kind of by the way that we treat ourselves. And I think that that's a fundamental core principle that's really important, is how do I lead myself? And then how am I teaching other people how that I'm going to lead them as well? And one of the main things that you talk about in your new book, The Moral Compass, is about integrity. How do you define integrity? Like, what does that actually mean to you?
Yeah. So a lot of times people think integrity is, do they have an oversimplified version of it, or they just take a definition from Webster's, or they think it just means not lying or just being honest all the time. And these are kind of oversimplifications of it. So the Moral Compass is the first book of a series of 6 books that's currently being produced, published by the Los Angeles Tribune Publishing House. We have the Moral Compass, which is Joe Vitale, New York Times bestselling author, wrote the foreword for. We have the Financial Compass, the Spiritual Compass, the Relationship Compass, the Physical Compass, the Peace of Mind Compass. So we have 6 books that we're writing, publishing, producing, myself along with other co-authors. And the reason why I bring that all that up, Carissa, is because there's a reason why the Moral Compass was the first. Before we talk about life financially, mentally, relationally, spiritually, or physically, we need to talk about life from a standpoint of integrity, because it's the whole foundation of building the home. This is the first layer. You cannot have a house without that very first concrete laid foundation, right? And so integrity is the foundation of life as a leader, as a human being, as somebody that wants to reach their peak potential. Without operating from a place of integrity, you cannot have a functioning business or a functioning life that is done in a harmonious way, coinciding with nature. If you don't have integrity, your life and your business is not going to be aligned with nature. It's not going to be aligned with God. It's not going to be aligned with your purpose in the universe. You cannot bypass this law. So a lot of people, there are people out there that are struggling to find their purpose, struggling to find their destiny, struggling to find their calling. That moral compass of integrity is the compass to your purpose. And so when you wake up in the day and you make a decision to do what is aligned with the universe, God, and aligned with integrity, doing things the right way, that's how you can actually live a life of purpose and service. And so, of course, the answer got a little deeper than I thought it would, but that's kind of that's kind of the general gist of what I believe integrity is.
Yeah, I mean, you think about when somebody's talking about the foundation of a house, they're like, the house has a lot of like, you're building the integrity of the house. It's the foundation for what everything else is built upon. So it can actually sustain the winds, it can sustain turbulence, it can sustain difficulty. And I think integrity is that in internal foundation that you have within yourself to do things that are moral and just and right. And ultimately, when you think about it, it's kind of like the umbrella is truth. If you can just be in alignment with truth, that like everything falls underneath that. And it's hard sometimes to know what's true, right? We have trauma that gets in the way of our truth. We have ways in which we operate in the world, which we think is truth, but not as the fundamental truth of God or the universe, right? So we're operating in these structures and systems. And so it seems like integrity is is the compass. And in many ways, we need our life experience to help us refine that for ourselves because we're human, right? We're constantly going to make mistakes. We're going to have difficulty. But I think somebody can make mistakes and do the wrong thing and still be in integrity. It's the level of responsibility that they take for doing the thing that's out of integrity or the thing that was out of alignment with themselves. And I think about some of the people that I respect the most who are leaders who have made mistakes, and I think about how they navigated those mistakes, how they've navigated that difficulty, even in a public setting, right? To really do something that was totally out of character, and how they were like, yeah, I messed up. I made a mistake, and how much more that made me respect them because they took responsibility. And, I'm curious for you, within the moral compass, there's 28 principles. What is one of your favorite? If they were somebody was gonna skim the book and they're just like, okay, I just want to go to the chapter that might give me the most juice. Is there one beyond kind of integrity or one principle that you think is is really going to help people understand the essence of leadership?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Carissa, I've had the opportunity to speak many times alongside with you with some of the biggest names in personal development, self-help, and literature that covers a lot of these subject matters that we discuss. Whether it is, having the chance to speak with folks like Joe Vitale, who's one of the co-authors, or Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank, Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Mark Victor Hansen, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Brian Tracy. I had the pleasure of being able to speak with the legendary Bob Proctor just weeks before he transitioned. And so one of his final public appearances, if not the final public appearance that I know of, was actually on the Los Angeles Tribune. And so I share all that to say that, I've had the opportunity to speak with so many of the incredible authors of our generation. And there are a few things that I call it like a sacred little thread that every single incredible teacher of our time discusses. Whether it is something along the lines of faith. Napoleon Hill had a tremendous amount of literature on faith, and we're working with the Think and Grow Rich Institute. We have a virtual summit with them coming up soon. But here's the thing. You have to, if you truly want to be a leader and you want to tap into these success principles, you have to believe when there's no evidence for you to believe. When you look around your surroundings and there's absolutely zero physical evidence that vision you have inside of your mind could possibly be a reality, that's the difference between someone that makes it and someone that doesn't make it. The person that doesn't make it looks at the physical evidence and says, you know what? There is absolutely no physical reason for me to believe that I can achieve what it is that I conceive, right? Mm-hmm. But the person that makes it says, I don't give a damn that there's no physical evidence around me. The only evidence I need is that vision I have inside. Okay. And so when the vision that you have inside is more powerful to you than the evidence on the outside, that is when you are on your path to truly being a leader on this planet. Because everyone that's ever achieved anything incredible has had moments where there's zero physical evidence that what they think they can achieve is possible. When Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs were struggling inside of a little garage, trying to scrape up and scrap up a prototype for this new idea that they had, there's zero physical evidence that they were on the verge of revolutionizing humanity and technology and everything about our day-to-day lives. Zero physical evidence. Two young guys struggling in a garage. And yet Steve Jobs held that vision. When Walt Disney got fired as a designer, there was absolutely zero physical evidence or proof that he would revolutionize the world of animation, right? When he was struggling, almost homeless, almost bankrupt, trying to figure out what to do with his life after he just got fired. Can you imagine Walt Disney getting fired as a cartoonist? And yet it happened. And so we have to recognize when there are no physical reasons to believe we can achieve what we conceive, and yet you hold on to your faith.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when there's no vision, the people perish, right? So having that vision of a greater world, a greater self, greater humanity is what allows the leader to endure what is required when you're trailblazing a new path and you're initiated into that space of, I don't actually know that I can do this, and I'm willing to try anyway. And it takes a significant amount of courage for somebody to lead. In this time period, I think there's a lot of conversation around leadership because we're really seeing as humanity, as a collective, that there are ways in which we all need to take more responsibility for ourselves and share that with the world in a way that we can all move towards a common goal. Right? That's beyond us. That's what transcendent leadership is about. It's about serving from a place of beyond self, knowing that the natural reciprocity of the universe provides for you. But transcendent leadership is really seeing beyond self, seeing beyond limitations, sourcing your power and sourcing your energy and sourcing the vision from an energy greater than you. It is about connecting to that heart space, which is the medium between worlds, what gives you access to God and leading from that place. And I think it's a radical thing to do, to really believe in something that we cannot see yet. And I think that that's what's happening to humanity. We're believing in a world that is more in harmony, that is more healthy, that is more that is really just more in a place of love and compassion. And yet we don't have evidence that are in history that we could ever achieve something possible. And yet leaders are stepping up and saying, I believe in a new world, I believe in a new vision, and that's going to require us to do things differently fundamentally.
Yeah, and there's always been, even metaphorically speaking, if you look at a lot of the religious teachers of our time, whether it's the dozens of stories from India, or whether it's the Christian ideology, there's always been historically that one voice, that one person that stands up to the corridors of power and says, you know what, we're going to change the way that we live life here as a human species. And what we actually find is that is a cycle. Every generation has those. We all have our heroes that stood up to the man, whether it's the Muhammad Ali's who said, we're not gonna live our life dictated by how you tell us to live our lives. The Martin Luther Kings, the Nelson Mandelas, the John Lennons in the world of art and music, to plant the seed of love and positivity. So we see a lot of that. We see a lot of leaders, generation after generation after generation. It's almost like a cycle. Mm-hmm. And so, it's our responsibility as leaders, more than anything else, to be fearless and have courage. Because what stands in the way of true leaders sharing their voice is when they lose the courage to share who they authentically are with the world, when they sell out, when they decide to minimize the power of their voice to get along with people as opposed to possibly offending someone, or when they want to go along to get along with a lot of the corporate structures of the world, even when sometimes going along to get along means losing a piece of your soul. And so one of the things I love about the Los Angeles Tribune is that we're a free speech platform. Yeah. And as an independently owned news publication, we have the opportunity to talk about positive news, talk about inspirational news, help people. I get people all the time, Chris, telling me, Mo, when I read the Los Angeles Tribune, after I read it, I feel empowered. But when I read other newspaper company products, or when I read another newspaper, I feel disempowered. And so, I believe that that's the role that we're playing in society, is to make sure that there's one option for the leaders out there. When you get your news, when you want to read a newspaper, you read the Los Angeles Tribune, because you will be empowered, as opposed to what other people have shared with me with certain newspapers out there in the world. And there's amazing newspapers as well, other than ours. But sometimes people are just tired of feeling disempowered when they read something. So that's what I'm so excited about, Carissa, especially with our events, both virtual and in person, our television network. We just recently announced we have a women's television network we're doing with JD3 TV, James Dentley, coming out soon. We have the Think and Grow Rich Institute tour that we're doing with the Think and Grow Rich Institute. That's going to be virtual, and we're working on doing something in person alongside that. We have our new publishing division, where we're focused on exclusively publishing nonfiction leadership books. That's specifically what we want to focus on. And we just hired a whole team of people to help run that division a company that previously existed that is now we're white labeling with them and doing the LA Tribune Publishing House. So they're bringing experience of publishing hundreds of books with them. And so I'm excited because everything that we're doing is about empowering people and empowering leaders to make a difference.
Yeah. And I think that the thread that I really want to highlight here is that leaders actually create more leaders. But I think there is this old paradigm of leadership that's crumbling, that like leaders create followers, right? But with the Los Angeles Tribune, and it's part of the main reason why I've actually chosen to work so exclusively with this brand and you, has been because what is published is like combed through and is gone through such a process of who's the contributors, who are the people who are coming along these events with us, and really ensuring that their voice is connected to this common vision of where we're going, and we're continuing to create more leaders. And so I really admire the brand and what you all are doing, and how you're not just saying, okay, we want to give people positive BS, right?
Yeah.
You want to really give people practical information and a buffet of wisdom, right?
Yes.
Something that you all are offering is not just like business leadership or corporate leadership, but is about personal mastery, emotional mastery. I've written articles for the newspaper that are about spirit and about spiritual laws of the universe. So there's so much information that people can access, given that they're paying attention to the right thing and they're placing their intentions in the right place. And what you all are creating is this really defined ecosystem and a community that people can be a part of, where they feel like they're contributing, even if they don't identify as a leader of a business or a brand or an organization. They're saying, I'm making an impact. I'm a part of this piece of history, right? You all are redefining media and what's newsworthy here. So that's really historical. And I think that it's like worth really highlighting for people to see that you're not just spreading information, you're really offering people a place to define their own leadership and come into their own empowerment.
And every single person that you have ever read in the Los Angeles Tribune, for the most part, got there organically. There's no way that you can just solicit us online or find an editor to pitch something to. It's not that easy. And we only get to pick approximately 50 thought leaders for our special quarterly thought leadership edition. And so, I think I got so excited here. You see what you. And Carissa, you get me so excited when you talk about that, because what's awesome is the Los Angeles Tribune newspaper, you need to be organically invited to be a part of it. And so if there's someone listening to this podcast right now that's wondering, how can I get involved in that movement? Carissa is who you want to talk to. So if you're listening to this podcast, if you're in Carissa's incredible community and you feel like getting your thoughts, getting your ideas, getting your business published, printed in a physical newspaper that you can frame and have for the rest of your life. And if you want to be affiliated with a brand like the Los Angeles Tribune, contact Carissa, because she's someone that she's one of the few people actually that are part of our gatekeepers, if you will, meaning when Carissa says, hey, this person should be in the newspaper, should speak at the event, should be in one of the films that you have producing. And we have so many exciting things between books, films, newspapers, events. I'm just excited because all of it has to do with thought leadership. And another way of saying thought leadership, I think, is the transcendence leadership that you're all about. Because one thing that few people know is that Maslow, who we've all studied in college and university, Maslow, who discusses, of course, the hierarchy of needs. You see, a lot of people are under the impression that at the top of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is self-actualization. What few people know, Carissa, is that when he was on his deathbed, he was working on the real top of the pyramid, because he discovered towards the latter part of his life and research that there's something above self-actualization, and that's self-transcendence. Right. And so what you're discussing to me is the ultimate power for an entrepreneur. That's why I think the work you're doing with your community is so important, because you're allowing entrepreneurs to tap into the highest version of themselves, which is not just operating from a place of self-actualization, but a place of self-transcendence. Right. And so to truly be the leader of 2024, 2023 to truly be a leader of the future world, right? If you want to join us in the realm of future leadership, you need to operate from a place of self-transcendence, right? The days of operating a business from our egos are over. The days of operating a business because we want to satisfy our own physiological needs as much as we can are over. That's old leadership. Carissa Johnson leadership, Los Angeles Tribune leadership is all about self-transcendence. What can we truly do to move our species forward? And so that's what I think the work you're doing is that's why it's so powerful and important. That's why this community is invited to participate in our programs, to advertise your business, to advertise your ideas, to invest in yourself and get your name and get your brand out there. So contact Carissa and we can make that happen.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That was actually a really important touch point that you and I had during our friendship. I was talking to you about how I was creating transcendent leadership, and you're like, most people don't know that. I was like, I feel like we're some of the only people who know that. And if anybody's interested and wants to take part in what we're talking about here, Abraham Maslow has a book called The Farther Reaches of Human Nature. And we're putting this on YouTube, so you'll be able to see the video here of the book. And it's actually some of his unpublished works around transcendence. And it's a really philosophical book, but there's also a lot of research and data in here that has been helping drive the frameworks that I've been creating around transcendent leadership. And you're absolutely right. We're really, we're transcending beyond self. We're transcending beyond limitations, identities even, right? Like I am this person, and really seeing the multi-dimensionality of our human existence. And one of the aspects that we're talking about here is transcending self. And I think what's been interesting being a part of some of the production and supporting with the events is I've seen the way that you lead and that you continue to lead. And one of the things that I love about you that I think is so underrated in leadership are two things. Number one, being a good listener and asking good questions. I think that what people often think is that leadership is about delegating, is about directing, and that's an aspect of it. But what is also really good, and I've seen you demonstrate really well in our conversations with team, is you listen, you're very attentive, and you're picking up on the subtleties of body language about people are saying what they're not saying, and really finding a place of commonality in the thread of all of the team members and asking questions that really invite a deeper inquiry and self-reflection around how people want to show up and what they want to contribute to. And so my question for you is related to this. What are some questions that you think that people can start asking themselves if they want to be a leader or they want to get to their next level? What are some of the best questions that people can be asking themselves to kind of go inward so they can start sharing more of themselves and their expression, their authenticity, and their leadership to the world?
I think there are a lot of people that are quite frankly dishonest with
Mm,
themselves about why they're doing what they're doing. I think that when you've spoken to as many entrepreneurs as I have, just in the last few years, speaking on so many stages, getting off the stage, having lunch, having people that you have conversations with on air, off air. And what I've noticed is a lot of entrepreneurs are in it for the wrong reasons, and they don't realize they're in it for the wrong reasons. What do I mean by that? Very specifically, there are people that are using their businesses as their own personal emotional piggy banks.
mhm,
And there are people that are using their businesses as a way to feel worthy about who they are as a person. Maybe they want attention. Maybe they believe that having someone else listen to them for guidance or consulting, it allows them to think, well, I must be powerful and important because this person is listening to my guidance. And so there's a lot of people that simply get off on that. And so I think that that is a recipe for disaster for both the people in business as well as their clients. I want people to be honest with themselves about why they are in business, and that takes some serious inner work. And if you're in business for any other reason other than to serve humanity, and of course, there's 100 different ways you can say that in a sentence, okay? But if you're in it for any other reason to serve humanity, serve your community, make a positive difference in people's lives, make a positive difference in your industry, help revolutionize your industry. The subtitle of the Los Angeles Tribune is Change the Status Quo, right? You don't hear that from a lot of newspaper companies, change the status quo. But yet that's why we do what we do, because we want to focus on making this world a better place by revolutionizing the relationship that people have with media companies. And so it's a very clear and concise vision. Now, there's a lot of people that, quite frankly, Carissa, are dishonest about why they're in business. And so have that honest conversation with yourself, just you, yourself, and, the universe, and, truly decide, am I doing this for my own personal emotional needs? Because if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing it, you're in the world of entrepreneurship for your personal needs, you're in it for the wrong reason. Entrepreneurship is not about you, it's about them.
Yeah.
Right. And so the law of attraction a lot of people misunderstand, and they think that the law of attraction is about getting. What they fail to recognize is that the law of attraction is about giving. And so your business is not about getting, your business is about giving. And so what are you giving on a day-to-day basis? That's the difference between someone that you look after a few years and you're like, holy shit, how did they progress so much? Versus you look after a few years and like, what the hell happened to them? Where are they even? So the ones that truly last in the world of entrepreneurship are the ones that understand that principle.
Yeah. The people who are really anchored into a solid why that can withstand, the difficulties. And I think about this all the time. I've been in business now for 4.5 years. And I feel that entrepreneurship is the crash course for self-development. It will show you where you play small, where you feel unworthy, where you're power hungry, where you shrink, where you sell out, and all of that. It will show you that. And it's been a journey of really staying connected to truth of who I am to be able to walk the path and get to the places that I've been able to and get really curious. And I've noted I had these conversations with a lot of clients as well, where they're not really being honest with themselves about why they're doing it. And in a world that glorifies entrepreneurship and a world that you're seeing everyone's highlight reel on social media, I do think there's a sentiment here that's really true. There's an aspect of being an entrepreneur or being a leader that is glorified, and there is beauty in it. But at the end of the day, it's not an easy thing to do, to really put yourself aside and be anchored to a larger mission, to be willing to navigate these personalities and other people's and the power games and whatever is not for the faint of heart. And so I think it requires a lot of self-honesty and a lot of reflection. And some of the questions that I think about for really inviting the audience to sit with is, like Mo was mentioning, what is your relationship to truth? What is your relationship to power? What is your relationship to wealth? What is this relationship? Because that's what it is. It's a relationship that you have. And if you're trying to get something from your audience, if you're trying to get something from clients, if you're trying to receive something, that is really not in the natural flow and harmony of life, right? It is about the vibration that you embody, which is of love, and that naturally overflows. And that's the giving energy that you're talking about with manifestation. People think that, oh, if I think the thoughts of getting the thing, I'm going to have it. It is true. It's about embodying the love that it is so deeply connected to God and to the universe and to whatever you believe that you naturally want to give, that you receive inherently just because of how much you're pouring out. And that doesn't mean that you sacrifice yourself in the process, but it just means you're in it for the right reasons, and that naturally flows through you. So I think that for the audience really sitting with these questions around what is your relationship with power, with wealth, with truth, and then really anchoring into why am I doing this and why does this matter? And really thinking about, as the CEO of a legacy brand, what is the legacy that I want to leave? What, when I die, what do I want people to say about this creation or this process? And if it has everything to do with, oh, he was or she was this kind of person, and like, wow, they made me feel this way, they changed our entire community, then it's worth reevaluating, because you're right, there's something deeper here that you're missing, and that's definitely a blind spot.
Yeah, sometimes the most the absolute maximum amount of courage to be honest is required for you to have a conversation with yourself. There are people that will be honest with everyone in their life except for themselves, because that is where you have all that shadow work that is required. That's when you have all of the excuses, the buildups, the narratives. Sometimes, a lot of times, people, they've created so many narratives in their head just to compartmentalize things, that they start believing their own BS. And so to be honest with yourself, I think is so important. There are a lot of people that are entrepreneurs just for the attention. And that's kind of sad. And to your point, Carissa, these days entrepreneurship is glorified like you're a rock star if you're an entrepreneur. That wasn't the case back in the day. 15 years ago when I was in the music business, you know, you go in the music business expecting that as part of your lifestyle, but these days 15 years later, and it wasn't the case even back in 2009 2008, but now entrepreneurs, thanks to social media and thanks to all these reels and the way that people have fallen in love, and Gary V and all these guys that have the last 5 10 6 7 years put so much entrepreneurship content, they actually need to get a lot of credit for kind of this cultural shift. For better or for worse, entrepreneurship is now being a rock star. And so I'm like, wow, I'm scrolling up and down and it looks like a flyer for a rock concert. I'm like, no, these are all entrepreneurs. They're all speaking at an event at the, at the amphitheater down the street. So it's bizarre because now entrepreneurship is glorified, and it used to be a boring thing, right?
It's not easy to do either.
No.
I think that's what is important to realize.
Yeah, it's not easy to do. It's energy work at its core, relationships, energy work. And you said it absolutely in the best way, where it's like a crash course for development, personal development. And so there's nothing that will be more challenging in your life as a business person than being an entrepreneur. And even on a personal level, because of all of the balance that you'll need to do. If you already have a family, and I was kind of lucky because I got into entrepreneurship before I got responsibilities with a wife or with kids, and that obviously makes it even more challenging when you have people that you need to support. So taking a leap of faith is easier said than done. And so my hat off to people that still pursue their dream even when they have people that are counting on them. And so as a single man, it's easier to take risks. You and I, we both have a lot of that in common in our journey, although we have 2 dogs that we love and we spoil. but that's a little easier. Taking care of Romeo or Blue is a little easier than taking care of a family of 4 or 5. Yeah. And so we have that to our advantage. And so if there's someone listening that is in that place, if they're, if there's someone young listening that doesn't have those kinds of responsibilities and they're wondering whether or not they should, go for it, because it only gets harder as you get older to take that leap of faith, as you start getting more and more conditioned into your way of life. And so if you're thinking about launching that business, if you're thinking about starting that business, if you're thinking about taking that leap of faith and taking that action step, and especially if you don't have the responsibilities of having to take care of a family, this is your time to do that, right? You owe it to yourself. One of the saddest things in life is wasted talent. One of the saddest things in life is looking back and saying, what could have happened? I'm so grateful that as a teenager, I pursued the music industry. Why? Because I had a tremendous amount of success. I also had a tremendous amount of failure simultaneously. And I'm equally grateful for both of those things. And I look back and I'm like, man, I actually tried and I had some cool things that happened. Did it work out the way that I thought it would work out? No. But I know what it looks like to actually try and to actually achieve something in that space. And so I'm so grateful that I did that. And I want other people to look back and recognize, wow, I'm so grateful that I tried. I'm so grateful that I went for it, that I shot for the moon. Worst thing that happens is you might hit a star. And so go for your dreams,
Wow, I love that quote. That's cute. I like that a lot. Yeah, something I want to ask as we begin to wrap up here is, I think that some people might listen to this podcast as well as other shows that I've had and look at you and say, wow, this guy, he's put together, he's got this legacy brand that he's running, they're doing all these events. There's an element of pedestaling and perfection that I think that some people can see. And you've been pretty honest and raw about where you're at. And I think that something I want to imprint and invite in is this remembrance that we're on a journey, that we're constantly growing, we're constantly evolving, and that we're never going to arrive fully at the destination. And that's the beauty. And I think also that we get to have these goals and milestones that we arrive at and celebrate. But something I'm curious about, as one of the last questions I ask you is, where are some edges that you're finding in your own leadership? I mean, you all are growing super fast, and even in the last 6 months to a year, starting new departments with publishing and doing a lot of new things and events
Yeah.
and working with higher level caliber of with thought leaders and whatnot.
Mhm.
What are some of the edges that you've experienced with the significant and accelerated growth that you had right now?
So when you say edges, Carissa, you talking about difficulties, challenges?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things with living a life in your business where you are all about, and I'm talking about myself now, I am all about building other leaders. And I will put other people in the spotlight, and I will edify people, and I will position people in a way that they have never been positioned before. And I will introduce them to powerful people that they've never been introduced to before. And what happens is when you start putting other people in the spotlight, there are other organizations, other individuals, other entrepreneurs that will try to build direct relationships with the people that you have built up and kind of cut you out of it. And so this is kind of something that's happened multiple times, not with one person, but with multiple people, multiple times. And so I have to recognize that my job is not to worry about what happens after I help someone tap into their own leadership. If you're in my life, I will help you tap into your own leadership, right? What happens afterwards is none of my business. Whether you're loyal or not is none of my business, because that's your journey. So knowing what my job is, knowing what my responsibility is, and being unattached to things that will happen in business. But definitely the disloyalty aspect of it is something that has been challenging. And I think every entrepreneur can relate to that. And it hasn't happened once or twice. It's happened multiple times. And I handle it. I address it. I address it legally, ethically, morally, non-violently, and I get the job done to keep us moving forward in the proper way. So I don't, I handle things the way they need to be handled. But that's always something that that is unfortunate, because I believe the key to longevity in business is longevity in relationships. And so coming across people that are quick to burn a bridge or do things where I have to eliminate and terminate the relationship is the most challenging part of it.
Yeah, I hear that too. And I think the old paradigm would have been like, oh, just cut that person out. But there's a level of heart and care and compassion. Otherwise, you wouldn't be investing in these people. So I think that that's the challenge of like navigating the head and the heart, right? Where it's like, okay, I understand this is this person's responsibility. And also like I really invested a lot of time and energy in some of these people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a natural sort of conundrum that you're in when you're in these kinds of positions.
We
And so go ahead.
we started the conversation talking about self-respect
Mm-hmm.
and how everything is tied to self-respect. And to truly be a good leader, you have to have self-respect. Whenever you're in a relationship with somebody in business where your self-respect is compromised, you must terminate that relationship, because your self-respect has to be your number one priority. I cannot run a business if there's people that don't respect me. How the
Mm-hmm.
hell can we work together?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like in a relationship, one of the reasons why people get divorced is because they stop respecting each other. Right? And you can't love someone you don't respect. You can't be with someone you don't respect. It's hard to break bread with someone that you don't respect.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But it starts with that self-respect. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something to sit with here for the people who are taking notes, which I know Mo will always take notes when we're
I
doing
love taking
event,
notes. I love taking notes.
is like, is
And you got to
also
take handwritten notes, because it facilitates whole brain functioning, by the way.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think with a pencil too, actually
Mhm.
something about, they say the lead in the pencil actually helps you anchor more deeply into it. And it is about, recognizing where the edges and the difficulties are and noticing where you are needing to take responsibility for your own self-respect, right? And so
Mhm.
you might end relationships, but it's not based on the premise that, oh, this person doesn't respect me. It's also saying, this isn't really alignment with the way that I respect myself. And so I'm not going to tolerate it from somebody else. So I think that's the larger thing here. And And so thank you so much for all this information and wisdom. I'd like to invite people into, some of the work that the Los Angeles Tribune is doing. So do you have, I know we'll have a link in the show notes for them
You know,
to
the
go into
greatest,
anything.
the greatest, and just one final thing about that,
Yeah.
Carissa, is Abraham Lincoln. There is a book written about Abraham Lincoln called Team of Rivals. And one of the most important things that Abraham Lincoln did in his presidency was manage the energy of a group of people in his administration that had varying points of view and varying agendas. Even when it comes to some of the projects of the Los Angeles Tribune, sometimes we have people that all have their own individual agendas, and it
Mm.
rubs the other people off the wrong way. Like, why am I getting involved in this when this person's doing? And I've gone through that now multiple times with multiple groups of people. And so at the end of the day, you can't avoid it, whether it's even putting on a small event or whether it's running the United States of America during the Civil War. Both of them have that same thing where you're dealing with different energy. And so the question, the point is to have the self-respect and not let anyone else's agenda interfere with your self-respect, and not let it interfere with what you're capable of doing, and not letting anyone minimize what you're capable of doing, whether it's in a project or in the world. And so that's also the key, because a lot of times when we get offended by someone, we're easy to just tap out.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is not what a leader does, right? A leader, even when you're offended by someone, you're gonna laugh about it and keep moving forward and keep doing what you do. So A Team of Rivals is a book that I highly recommend, because what made Abraham Lincoln the greatest president of all time was his ability to do that. And unless you read that book and study him, people don't really have that perspective. Very few people go into business with their rivals, but Abraham Lincoln did exactly that, right? He understood that he needs his rivals, people that he doesn't always agree with, to truly move the country forward. And so when I'm running my business, sometimes I got to work with my rivals, and it's all good, it's all love, because we're working for a positive thing when it's all said and done. And so
Yeah.
again, taking your personal ego out of it, your personal feelings out of it, your personal emotions out of it, that's the challenge. Because at the same time, as entrepreneurs, we're passionate. Those of us that are living our callings and not our careers, we're passionate about it. So how can we be so passionate about it and at the same time manage our emotions? That's the challenge of a transcend. That's why Carissa's work is so important for high-level entrepreneurs, to understand that balance, to understand how to be a transcendent leader. And if you want to get involved in the Los Angeles Tribune Project's newspaper, we have an incredible event, Think and Grow Rich event. If you want to be a speaker, a sponsor, if you want to advertise in the newspaper, write in the newspaper, you can contact Carissa and her team directly, and she'll be able to get you guys settled in to our incredible projects.
Yeah, I will definitely be the liaison for sure. And I'm going to read that book because I feel in many ways that's my area of growth for me right now is managing and working with people who I don't see eye to eye with, and feeling like the aliveness and alignment of where I want to go, and bringing people on who are the same on board, but also realizing there's medicine in working with people who I don't have that kind of relationship with. And you've been a person who's invited me and challenging me deeper into that, which I've admired and respect about you and our relationship. So, wow, we went on a journey. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your light and sharing your truth, and for really continuing to stand for redefining media and really elevating leaders and creating more leaders in the world. I absolutely appreciate you and have an enormous amount of respect for the Los Angeles Tribune and what you all are doing. And just thanks for taking time today.
Thank you, Carissa. And I'll say it right here publicly while we're being recorded. I love you. I appreciate you. And you're an incredible human being. And I'm looking forward to a lot of exciting projects. You will be speaking at the next Think and Grow Rich Institute tour. You'll be involved in different ways as well, pending your busy schedule. And so I'm excited for all the exciting things we got going on.
Yeah, I feel that. Well, thank you so much. Love you too, and appreciate you. And for all the listeners, if you took something away from this show, definitely share it with a friend, a family member, a colleague. Tag us on social media and let us know what you took away. Show us your notes that you took down. We'd love to know what you took away from it, and how you're applying it to your life. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye.